There we go. I got to do it on YouTube. And good evening, everyone. We are here. And thank you to my friend, Mr. Dave Sauer, for being here as well. And
Hello.
it's Thursday. And Dave will do the quick intros while I take care of someone in the area over here. And we are good. Um, I think I did that correctly. So we've got our first moderator in the history of the Schmuel Buckman podcast.
Wow.
Mr. Cigarette Jones is helping me out tonight, and so let's get this show on the road. We're going to have Leo Helmer. Leo will be joining us. Leo is, for those of you who don't know him, he did a pretty amazing steel toe video, and we're not going to talk steel toe tonight because he's been all over talking about that. But I wanted to grab him and talk to him about some of the other YouTube lawsuits and stuff that are going on in our universe. So Leo will be in a minute. If you're not familiar, we're going to be talking about Denver Metro Audits is suing Fraud or Troll, and Ethan Klein is suing everybody. He's suing 3 or 4 people. So that'll be interesting. We'll get into those some side topics of First Amendment auditors and frauditors and some sovereign citizen shit. So hopefully that'll be cool. I'm gonna turn my mic down a little bit. And I think we should be great. All right, so ready to go, kids. We're gonna bring her in and add to scene. Leo, good evening.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, you're either. Are you loud or is it me? It's got to be me, right?
I'll handle it. You just talk.
Okay, I can hear you well, Dave. It's nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you,
The
buddy.
best.
Yeah.
So this is Dave, Leo, Dave. Dave is an unexpected visitor tonight. What do you call it? We didn't think. No, he's
I'm the
he's
producer.
our regular co-host, but we didn't think he was going to
Okay.
make it. And he's producing and doing all sorts of stuff. And in the background, helping us, we have a young gentleman named Cigarette Jones, who's keeping an eye on the chat. And
Hey, where are you, David?
so there we go. And Dave is in control of the soundboard.
Sounded faintly John-like. I don't know if I believe you.
That was John. That
Faintly.
was definitely John.
It better sound a lot better than faintly.
Yeah.
So
It's been a while.
Leo, which brings a question, right? How did you find the Dabbleverse, and how did they? I know how they found you. And,
I think you're the
I'm
introductor.
responsible for that, but you popped up in an algo. I watched your video and immediately thought, oh, these pretty antisocial ladies. This guy is like right up their alley. And I not only watched your video, I liked your video. Like it was one, it was thoughtful, but it was intelligent, which is not something that we get. You didn't seem like you had an axe to burn. And that was kind of important because everybody in this universe seems like they're either a steel toe guy or a Ricada guy, whether they want to be or not. And I think in that stream, you focused predominantly on the facts surrounding the case, which is hopefully what we'll attempt to get to tonight. I really thought, I should put up streams explaining, DMA and Denver Metro Audits and the other one. And I'm like, no, they're suing everybody for copyright infringement. I don't want to be I don't want to be part of that. So in any event, that's where we are. So long question, but tell us how you got here.
I think I get the context, and I think I got here the same way a lot of other people did. Like when I hear Cardiff Electric talk about his route into the Dabbleverse, I think it's pretty similar to me, except for my first radio love was really like Art Bell back in the day, which uh, is a good parallel to Pretty Antisocial as well. I guess their show before it became a Dabbleverse show was sort of like a paranormal type show or something like that, which is amazing. What a transformation! But yeah, I just love radio, and I grew up listening um, to a lot of like just random clips on the internet, like Stern stuff. I'm from Alaska and spent like almost most of my adult life on like the West Coast, so I never listened to those guys live, but I just come to it as a lover of the talk radio format and lots of other stuff besides those main ones. But yeah, and I don't think I really had much of an agenda. Like I find niche communities really interesting and something I've made videos and written about for years. Like I've written about cults. My work's been featured in like academic journals and on all sorts of weird websites. And I did like a video series last year about like a sort of cult that was forming in an anti-Scientology group, which was bizarre. And I just am always been really interested in niche groups with like extreme or outlier beliefs, which this Dabbleverse definitely falls into. And radical feminists, all sorts of interesting weirdos.
It's funny that you say the thing about the Scientology cult, because I was following that and it was hilarious because the anti-Scientologists were becoming as bad as the Scientologists. It kind of faded away, or I don't know if it faded away, but I faded away from it. But,
Yeah, me too. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I had the same route, and I don't really know. I still get contacted by people. I don't want to give too much more context than that, but like I don't think it's totally faded away, but I think it's like he's Aaron Smith Levin is the guy we're talking about. He was a pretty prominent guy for like a hot minute there during the Danny Masterson trial. Basically coincided with him gaining big popularity on YouTube and having like a group of weirdos, including Clearwater Chad, following him around in like a network of loosely affiliated anti-Scientology protest groups, which has a lot of commonality now that I think of it to the audit movement. But yeah, it was something that I tried to describe in a couple other videos and that I mentioned in the last video I did about Aaron is that I think he shares some of those characteristics of a leader of like a failed cult or what I call like a second order cult. It doesn't have all the ingredients, and Aaron's not spilled enough creep, but yeah, I love that kind of stuff. So
he's also a follower and not really a leader. But you did what you did say, which is very funny. Clearwater will be on Saturday night. I do a backyard stream that's kind of just random. Clearwater's coming on, and most people are just finding out that he's coming in, that where he came in from.
Yeah.
Because his main thing when he first came in was breaking balls on Chad Zumach, and he's Clearwater Chad. So people thought it was a take because Chad's in Tampa. So people thought, oh, Clearwater Chad is a takeoff on Tampa Chad. He's like the anti-Chad, and didn't know that. And then he does do the Frank Amadeo attorney, and Frank, was plotting to take over the world. So that another interesting story. So Chad has a backstory that nobody knew about, and we're kind of exposing it here tonight.
Well, the thing that I've heard about Chad is that he actually has a backstory to that backstory. Like,
really?
There's something like, I think one of the most interesting things people have picked up on is like, for some reason, the potato Cardiff likes him, and I think it's because he has like a whiff of that like sensibility of being, I don't know, just alive in the moment, or he's a good operator on his feet. Sometimes he's terrible, but I don't know, he has like a whimsical mind, but he's also like almost a perfect example of what I consider a big necessity to a cult, which is like your first followers. Like you need somebody completely credulous, like that just goes along with it because he wants to be next to power, and that's what he was to Aaron Smith Levin. Like he was his main abettor, and what him and the other channels in the SPTV network would do is attack Aaron's victims, like women he had allegedly abused or whatever. So he has a very dark past, but I'm not even really sure what his perception of it is. And that's really the danger of that follower archetype, is like, I don't think they even really sort of are thinking about it in terms of like theory of mind and how other people are thinking. They're just going along and wanting to do something that's like, I don't know, somehow. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know about the I'm not one that's big on making, psychological
Yeah,
diagnoses of people. I know other people do. Um, uh, but so but that leaves me open to just say, oh, he's a nut. But the M Hulk guy and other people, Stuttering John, um, they have like this narcissistic, antisocial uh, personality disorder thing. They thrive on conflict. Um, and so it's fascinating to watch. To me, the part that I find fascinating is uh, watching Aaron spiral down and at the same time claim he's rising up. Same thing with Stuttering John. The difference is, I don't know what Aaron's money is. I don't know what he makes, but Stuttering John on Playboard was grossing around 90K a year. So that's 60K take home. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. Now, do you trade your dignity for that? That's a question that I don't know the answer to.
yeah, it's a tricky situation to talk about. It is one of the reasons why I've like sort of made little attempts, like, well, I'm talking about something else that relates to it. And I don't like using psychological labels either. I find them, generally to have at least harm as good in a lot of situations. And I wasn't trying to do that by referring to his theory of mind, but I just think of him as an archetype. And I think a lot of that is influenced by the early cult researcher Hannah Arendt, who also was a scholar of the Holocaust, and she wrote a lot about these sort of ingredients that you need for a cult to thrive. And so that's sort of where I'm taking that line of thought from, is the literature.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not that smart. So
No, I'm
I,
not either, which is why I'm probably bumbling
it's
it.
well, it is pretty funny because on when in the Dabbleverse, when anything even remotely legal comes up, um, all the YouTube lawyers come flying out of the woodwork, and they say things, and I'm like, they have no idea how this works. And I do love the constant, you could sue him for defamation. Sure, if you've got 10 grand you want to throw around and not get anything for it.
When you say YouTube lawyers, do you mean chat room lawyers?
Yeah,
Or like
chatter
keyboard lawyers?
keyboard lawyers.
Because
Yeah,
there is such thing as YouTube lawyers, and
yeah.
they do come out and talk about some stuff. But I know
I
what you're talking about. Yeah, you
I
mean more like
yeah. And the one guy, the God, what is it? The
Potentially
guy in
criminal.
the
Is that
guy
the guy
in
you're-
yeah, potentially Sean, the big
It's the
big.
worst name for a channel ever. It means nothing. It's like, what does it even mean?
I like him. He could be he seems like he could be a handful at parties, and maybe he was that guy that maybe peed his pants at your birthday party growing up. But I enjoy his content. He seems like he's entertaining. In other words,
I don't know if you were on with me. I was on a Twitter stream, and I made a comment about him. I couldn't remember what his name was, and I said something like, "Does anybody know the name of this guy? The fat guy from Ohio who does the thing." And
Yeah.
of course, somebody puts in potentially criminal, and boom, there he is in the tweet
Like
stream.
Beetlejuice. Yeah.
And he said, if I could find it, it was very funny because his response was, because I was like, I really don't think this guy is like, I was listening to something he said. It didn't seem very legal to me. And he was like, oh no, fucking with Nick. That's basically what I do. And
Yeah.
that was his thing. And then of course, somebody then had to send me his work history,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
which is hilarious. And the one thing they did say is he lists a probation department in some very rural Ohio county as having worked, but he says, I'm a part of, I was a part of it's either the probation department. Yeah, I think it was the probation department. And this guy was like, he said part. He didn't say attorney for. He said part. And supposedly that was this big reveal that I didn't get, you
Yeah.
know?
I think one
And
thing that happens with these sort of attorneys is like they don't have much like rubber meets the road experience, like working in the courts and seeing how things actually operate. Because there's a big difference between like what's in the four corners of the paper and like what happens as it's applied to the real world. And also like the states, the difference between the laws in the states is sometimes like kind of dizzying. And one of the things I did a lot when I worked for the attorney general here was do like research into like all 50 different state laws and like whatever DUI or something else, and it's revealing. And this case with Aaron's a great example because there's certain things in it, like when I was on with potentially now I'm calling it pretty antisocial. I was saying like I can't really tell you much about bail because I didn't spend like the last week looking into it because it's so different in Minnesota. And the same thing goes for the fee arrangements, which is something I've been really trying to look into because Minnesota happens to be one of the only jurisdictions in the U.S. that allows flat fee. Well, it was a Freudian slip, but one of the only places where you can do like a flat fee agreement with an attorney, where like Aaron did, where he just gave $8,000 for the whole case, and like the American Bar Association and basically any group of lawyers with any sort of power and reason, it, like says this is a terrible idea because it puts the interests of the client and the lawyer against each other, and ends up in situations like Aaron's situation where it's like now it's just going to get real squirrely.
all right, we want to stay away. We're trying to stay away from it, but I have to say this. Frankly, I think um, I'm a fan of the flat fee situation in like some of these cases,
Sure.
particularly like a criminal case like this, because he knows what he's going to get. He knows the attorney. He knows what he's going to get. He knows what he's going to do, and then your expectation level as a client should be adjusted accordingly. And
I should clarify though that like what I didn't say that very precisely because I was trying not to filibuster, but the flat fee arrangement in Minnesota doesn't require that money to be put in trust. Like other states that have a similar thing require it to be put in trust because sometimes cases just get dismissed and the lawyer works for an hour and gets 10 grand. So that's the big difference is that they don't.
see,
They don't.
I assumed it was sort of the other way. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
Quantum merit, we call that, my friends. Quantum merit.
sure.
So yeah, because that's I've dealt with that a couple of times in my life. But it's interesting. So essentially, what Leo is saying is that in Minnesota, when you hire a criminal attorney, you can you did a flat fee arrangement with him, and he has no obligation to return the money. But then it's like, I don't know. It's like anything. You selling a car, right? You get $1,000 each time you sell one. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard.
Like
So
what an
everybody pays for
example
everybody else.
an example is like the business model of selling software for like a fee, like they used to do with Adobe Photoshop, where you paid like $300 and you had it forever. And
Right.
the software as a service model, it creates these incentives where like they just want to do the least amount of work possible in that arrangement because it behooves them. That's how they get the most profit. And that's why I think a lot of the weird stuff happened in this case where it appeared that Todd wasn't up to speed on the specifics of the case. That's my speculation.
All right. I want to, but I am the only defender of Todd that I know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
He, in my mind, he got Aaron the sweetest of plea deals,
yeah. Yeah.
and
That's a great
Aaron
point. That's a great
and
point.
Aaron fucked it up, right?
That is a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, people want to talk shit about Todd, but it's like trying to mold shit or whatever, whatever other analogy you want to say about like, having a bad coach or
Yeah.
have the horses for the race or whatever.
Yeah. You can't really.
Yeah. I mean, because I think he did what he against odds, right? He got Aaron, like Aaron's like, oh, it's such a simple thing, and it's very hard. And I'm like thinking, maybe it's that guy Todd is actually the guy that got this for you, and just shut up, But I guess that's attorneys telling you to shut up is like the sun coming up. They tell you all the time, but you can't stop some of these people from doing what they're going to do. So let's do two things. First, I want to say, Leo Gunn, Leo, you will always be the original Leo, and we love you.
Sure.
And I apologize to everyone who thought Leo Gunn was the guest tonight. No, I'm kidding. Nobody thought that.
Isn't that the name of a character from like Karate Samurai or something like that? Is that like a deep cut reference to like Red Letter Media or something? So I think that
I
was
don't.
the actor's name that played like the Chinese guy in Samurai Cop. That's what it was.
I was always thinking of Peter Gunn,
Hmm.
the character, right? But I have no idea.
Anyway, sorry.
Was-
I think it's
And then
an anagram, but and I'll explain to you later. So because I don't want to.
Oh yeah, no, I'm
Um,
sorry to divert. I always-
No.
and
You're not the bird.
Elston Gunn was the name of Bob Dylan's alias,
Mm.
not
Yes.
his real name.
Are you guys
But
into
his
Dylan
alias.
at all?
Into
It
who?
sounds like you are. Are you guys? It sounds like you guys are into Dylan then, huh?
I love Bob Dylan. Huge.
Yeah, me
Dylan
too.
fan.
I'm a huge. Yeah, I was like really getting into like crawling the message boards.
Oh, really?
What's the
Okay.
one
Well, I
called?
mean, I'm not that big of a fan, but I mean, like Highway 51 and some of these songs,
Yeah.
like even like the ones that don't really appear on any albums, like I can't even remember the names of them, but like I lost my original train of thought. It's okay.
Sure. Yeah. We should abandon it anyway. It's not going anywhere. But
Oh, what I was gonna say was that growing up, like I realized slowly that all my favorite Nirvana songs were really
yeah,
David Bowie songs of Bob
Yeah.
Dylan. So it's like, oh shit, I just went to the root.
My freshman year in high school, I had my English teacher was obsessed with Bob Dylan, and he played Masters of War for us on an old record player, and that was what we did our work on, and that's learn to write, the sort of high school English, and I always Mr. Krause and Mr. Krause's hockey puck. He used to have a roll of tape that if you disrupted the class, it was headed your way. And the best thing is he usually just missed your head. So little different back there in those late 70s. But in any event, yeah, he gave me an appreciation for Bob Dylan. Not other music too much, but Bob Dylan. So there we go. All right. Let's talk about Denver Metro Audits and what's going on there. So Denver Metro Audits is suing Frauditor Troll, claiming that Frauditor Troll used his copyrighted material on YouTube. Denver Metro Audits this occurred in 2023. The airing was in 2023. Denver Metro, and I keep saying DMA, and I don't want to confuse that with DMCA. DMA filed the copyright strike against Frauditor Troll. Frauditor Troll appealed. 10 days went by. There was no fight, no court fight, no filing.
Yeah.
The video went back up. In 2024, Denver Metro Audits then registered that show, and correct me if I'm getting the dates wrong or anything, Leo. 2024, DMA registered that with the Copyright Office, paid his $65 and registered it. And then in 2025, is suing currently Frauditor Troll for violating his copyright. And the quick background is Denver Metro Audits is what's known as a First Amendment auditor. And these are the guys, Chili DeCastro, you guys might know from the ATP, places like that. They go around with cameras in public places. I will say harassing, that's my word, harassing employees and individuals. And the frauditor community make fun of make fun of the First Amendment auditors, and so there's a lot of animosity. So this isn't just like Dave did a documentary on a subject.
Hey,
and
where
then
are
Leo
you,
decided
David?
to put it up. So there we go.
Dave's not home, man.
Did I cover that at all?
Yeah, I mean I didn't like write out a timeline. It was interesting listening to that first summary video that you sent to me because the guy sort of has this attitude, almost like Paul Harvey, to reference another old radio thing, where it's like, this is the way it is, and it was just odd, the sort of personalities that get involved in these communities. But I mean, that roughly aligns with my understanding of it. And there was some sort of dispute about the whether or not the claims were time barred. But I think that, like, the thing that I am have been wondering about, and like can't immediately find an answer looking at the DMCA or opinions in the Northern District of California, is like, what are the damages? Like, what is this guy saying that, like, he's been like, what is he claiming in terms of like what he wants in the lawsuit? Like, I just
So
don't see how. Yeah,
yeah, if you in the lawsuit, he actually talks about numbers that he lost, viewers that he lost, and viewers that Fraud or Troll got. And then, if I remember correctly, we're talking like 53,000 ish. We're not
yeah,
talking, millions. And a lawyer who I saw reviewing this, Patrick Darcy, I think I
yeah,
sent you that video as well.
yeah,
Pretty famous appellate attorney in California, made a comment that on he's a very small channel, but he's a very influential guy. And he said one of his videos did 200,000 views and he made $300 on it.
yeah.
So he can't imagine what the damages would be. So, I don't know. I mean, is it a shot across the bow of everybody? That's the question.
It's one of the interesting things about these two communities that seem to like revolve around each other, like a dog chasing its tail, where it's like the First Amendment auditors are like, kind of going about asserting or testing their First Amendment rights, like in a confrontational and odd way, and the anti auditors are like saying that's bad, and so I'm going to go about that, like auditing your audit in a confrontational. It's like it's almost like a Joker and the Batman at a certain point. It's like they need each other, or it's sort of this. It's very convoluted, but it also, I'm always sort of suspicious of a lawsuit if, like, you're not going to cover the filing fee in terms of what your potential damages are. There's got to be some sort of ideological bent, or it's interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, DMA is mad at the other guy, and there obviously seems to be a little bit of hypocrisy claiming you're a First Amendment auditor wanting to protect our First Amendment rights, but then going after somebody for exercising theirs. And when you read the lawsuit, what's so funny is it goes to great length to talk about the insults that Fraud or Troll made against DMA, and the insult, and it was you made me the subject of ridicule, kind of thing. And the Darcy part was, Darcy's like, well, that's what fair use is all about, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly what it is. So,
Yeah, like in a complaint or your initial filing, like, you're not really supposed to put too much spice in it unless it's like something in a celebrity case when you're trying in the media or something. I mean, even then, it's like not the forum for that. So it always sort of just reeks to me of like amateur hour. But I mean, I don't know. That applies to like actually like lawsuits that are seeking monetary damages from somebody who has money. So I don't know how that relates in this instance. And DMCA stuff is is a strange animal of its own, and there's not a lot of precedent that I can find, which makes sense out there, because it's like kind of insane to even go that far. But the one thing I want to say about like First Amendment stuff is like the whole idea of the First Amendment is to protect unpopular speech, and so to have that system work, you're just gonna have to accept that like the people that end up making a lot of the case law are like the most disagreeable people. Like a lot of the good case law that we have for First Amendment stuff in terms of the way that it interacts with government is like Jehovah's Witnesses, who are like intransigent about saluting the flag or all sorts of other weird anti-government stuff. And so that's sort of the point. And I think a lot of people have just sort of not ever really heard much about this concept, or are not comfortable with it for whatever reason. But I love this kind of stuff. Like whenever I hear something's a taboo, I'm like, oh, tell me more, So it appeals to me, and I understand that's my own bias.
Yeah, look, so you go back, the Jehovah's Witness stuff is fascinating. Um, if you remember back when the ACLU actually used to be the ACLU,
Yep.
with the Nazis in Skokie,
Yep.
right? And they got the Nazis the ability to express their First Amendment for a march, and it was like 8 people, but yet it changed law everywhere. Except now they would be the first people. They were nowhere to be found
Yeah.
during all the COVID talk. So that was
And that
that.
really speaks to like the general sort of feeling and tenor in the country. I mean, I think maybe it's changed a little bit, but who really knows? We're like in the fever swamps at this point for like forever. But um, it's just like if the ACLU lost the plot, like how are you to expect somebody who's not a lawyer or familiar with these concepts to?
No, and look, but it's pervasive throughout all of these organizations, even like the Southern Poverty Law Center, right?
Yeah, yep.
Instead of what they were originally designed to do, they kind of just became a whip and started going after people. Their founder got sued, which forced them to then reorganize, and they're reorganized in like the Bahamas or Cayman or something like that to try to make their funds untouchable. But ideologues of any type or size, right? You could almost say that the ACLU was anti-ideologue at one time, right? Like they were like, no, we're not going to let you push us around. We're not going to let you do these things. And we value all this sort of, even if it's crazy, we value their speech. It's important to society. And now we've gone in an opposite direction where we want to shut it down. That's what I think is with the DMA lawsuit. That's what I think. I think part of that is, I think that's, he wants to shut it down. And when you ask about the attorney and getting paid and all that, I think he's doing it as publicity as well. So there we are. I am going to do something very rude. Give me one. I have to turn off a fan
Sure.
behind
Yeah,
me.
no problem.
And
Not a problem. Yeah, not a problem. I think this will bridge into an area that will maybe talk about that stuff more broadly in like the history of the movement, because that's something that Schmuel and I have chatted about in the background. There's a lot of interesting backstory to this whole where did the First Amendment auditors come from? What's their lineage and history? I think is where we can maybe bridge into from here, but or wherever you want to go. Obviously, I was just filling in there.
no, it was good. Yes, thank you. And then right, so we have that, right? So we start with that. You start with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the flag, right? And for any of you people that don't know this, Jehovah's Witnesses did not want to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day. Eventually went to court, even though there's very few Jehovah's Witnesses. They won,
Yep.
giving you the right to not have to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, which you might find disgusting, but I think is pretty cool, because nobody's forcing you to do anything. Because when that flag changes to something else, hopefully you won't have to stand up and look at that, either. Or it just gets carried too far, right? So we go for.
Didn't they change it? Didn't some schools change it to the pride flag? And then didn't they basically rehash this whole thing?
I've heard that there's probably lawsuits about that, but I don't know that they're as landmark as the Jehovah's Witness one, because it was
no. I mean,
yeah.
I mean that they were kind of
But yeah,
referenced.
it's interesting how these things echo each other. And one of the things I was just thinking about is how the witnesses come from a tradition that's like the sort of proto-MAGA thing, the Millerite tradition, which it's one of the things I find really fascinating. And one of the reasons why I spent a lot of time reading up on the witnesses is they come from this cluster in like upper state New York, where like a bunch of other like Seventh-day Adventists, a number of other currently extant religions came from. And they all were like, I can't remember, it's like millennial, but it's millennial. They were all like predicting the end of the world by 1914 or something like that. They all had that sort of apocalyptic tone. which may remind you of certain groups that are currently pushing a similar theme. But
Well,
there,
1914 is also, I don't mean to cut you off, is also
No.
an interesting time too,
Yes.
because I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole conspiracy of the banking stuff.
Oh,
but
yeah.
regardless of that, like just World War I in general,
And I think that kind of gave them some purchase to keep going. Like there's some coincidental events there, but the witnesses are fascinating. And one of the other things too is like they have a lot of overlap, and I think like all these high control groups like borrow from each other. And one of the things I talked about in my video about Aaron Smith Levin is that a similar thing was happening in the witnesses at the time, where there's this guy, and I don't even know if he's still making content, but his God, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name now, but he was like a similar guy who was like a former witness who left and was making anti-witness content, and there was like a cult of personality building up around him, and he like had a similar fall from grace where it was revealed he was like a shithead and abusive. And it was like, oh my God, these are like the same guy.
There was like a Zero Dark Tony guy that did that with the Scientology that kind of turned into was like a supposedly Scientology.
Lloyd Evans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
But you just end up, they're just, I don't know. I found it really fascinating. Like in one of the most interesting things to me is like, how is it that like there's like a sudden immersion of a number of different religious movements from like one specific place in time? That's a really interesting question.
Yeah. And the Jehovah's are pretty funny. They actually, so the upstate New York people are the Mormons, and I believe the Jehovah's are Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there's certain parts of the tradition that come from the Millerite tradition, which is like the original one. They're Bible study programs that like branched out in like, it's not all of the Mormon thing. I think I'm not any sort of expert on this, but that's my understanding. Yeah, but yeah, you're right.
Joseph Smith and those guys were up. That's where the stones were, and where he found his book, and all of that stuff, which we could get, which today many would claim is happening again, with these health and wealth and prosperity guys, but that's an argument for another time. On the Jehovah's Witness thing, I think, and Dave's pride thing, I feel like the Jehovah's Witnesses were willing to be shamed for not standing for the flag. And what they did with the pride thing was the society's changed and we don't want to be shamed. And that's why they would sort of stand for the pride flag or honor the pride flag, because you didn't want to be ostracized.
Right.
And part of being a Jehovah's Witness was you were willing to be ostracized.
Well, that's why, in my opinion, you shouldn't really look at, I don't want to like reduce this to just like a political thing, but like when you look at politics linearly versus circularly, or what they call the horseshoe politics, it's like we're fighting the same exact thing on two completely sides of the spectrum. So when you look at them, they're really much closer than you think, the left and the right, or the extreme left and the extreme right.
So I just want to say to the chat, we're following it. We've got you in there, and
I haven't even looked at it. Sorry.
We're gonna get to it. Well, they're not really. We're getting a lot of. Let's just see here. Cigarette Jones, what might legal right in enforcing no solicitors?
I love how this is gonna turn to fucking like Love Line, the legal version of Love Line. Like, I got something on my dick. How do I fix it?
One thing I wanted to say like about this whole phenomenon of like First Amendment auditors and sovereign citizen movement, which I think gave it like is one of the big parts of where this thing came from, is like I, on one level, like definitely sympathize with like why they're there. Like these people don't come from no place. Like these movements were created, I think, because of like a lack of education and understanding and like the corruption of the legal system. And believe me, like there's a reason I try not to involve myself directly in like working in that field anymore, is because it's like maddeningly, opaque, and it's, there's a lot of very valid criticism. So I understand, I think, like where it comes from. I think it's, you can argue about their tactics and lots of other things, but I think one thing that like I just always bothers me, like when I see like a judge like going off on a sovereign citizen guy, is like, you're supposed to treat everybody equally, and everybody's supposed to have the same access to the courts, and so it just Yeah.
But aren't we learning from the Aaron Imholt thing that above all, judges, courts, all these, they all want to be treated as if they're something special, and not liking them or being disrespectful to them, that's the biggest offense. My experience.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's one of the main reasons why your lawyer tells you to shut up, especially when you're in court, because your conduct in that courtroom, it just seemed like so many people talk themselves into losing years of their life in like a moment, you know? So it's a big thing. And this is why I think that these systems are so interested in stuff like the common law and maritime laws, because that's where all our stuff comes from. Like a lot of our current system is based on common law. Like
Right.
still, so it's mystifying, and there. Anyway, I don't
Affy,
want to get
Leo
too into
can Leo, can you imagine Gino Bisconti in a courtroom? I
yeah.
actually have a question for Leo that I'm going to ask him about Gino Bisconti, but we're going to save that for a little later on because I didn't want to get us too off track with it.
And yeah, I can't imagine it because I've basically seen it like hundreds of times, but like not maybe as like totally diluted and with the special flavor of a Gino Visconti.
Do they
The
wear a
gold.
headband?
I People wear a lot of stuff to courts, which is another thing that you can do to get yourself
Oh,
in a
I
jam.
I saw an Indian guy. He was wearing like a bright orange and like lime green silk shirt with like some very goldish pants as like a attorney. And the judge made a remark, and the comment, which we didn't all hear it, but he made some kind of racial pejorative under his breath and nearly got kicked out of court. But it was bright. It was a bright suit. He wasn't black though. He was Indian, so I don't know.
Yeah, I will say it just on courtroom attire. I don't know if any guys watched the Derek. Well, I'm sure you did the Derek Chauvin trial, right? He showed up with like colored, they were dark colored shirts with his tie. They look like Costco shirts to me,
Right.
and I'm like,
Kirkland.
yeah, never show up to court. Like I don't know. He looked like a thug trying to dress up nice for the day, and
Yeah.
a simple white shirt would have worked out.
It's like they told him to downplay it a little bit, right? They're like, loosen the tie, Should I wear like that scene from Black Sheep? He's like, tie or no tie? The guy's like, loosen the tie. He's like, yeah, you got it.
It's so great. Yeah,
He looked comfortable at a uniform, like he needed a uniform type shirt.
This is like such an interesting thing because I think, like, one of the things I think is interesting about the system is like trials, because all sorts of really interesting stuff happens, and like those sort of things about perception really do matter. And it was something that there's like a group of like older women that were at the office when I got there that were like paralegals and other like legal paraprofessionals, and they were like obsessed with like how the clients dressed and like ran programs to get donated clothes and dressed for success and all this stuff. But it really does matter. Like that sort of thing you might think is window dressing, but like it's a signifier. It's very important. And if you come to court like dressed in sweatpants, you're not going to have great outcomes.
But and also too, I mean, if you're the jury, like nobody wants, I shouldn't say nobody, but nobody with a real job or a life wants to do jury duty. And so you're sitting there, you're forced to be there, and the guy comes in looking like shit, and your attitude is like, you couldn't show me a little respect. You could see, like I'm here. The least you could have done was put on a tie, or something similar. But it is very funny because I would be willing to bet that if you could do it, if you took did a randomized study where you had people who dress well and people who didn't, same charges, same everything, you'd get different results from the jury based upon what they look like.
This is the sort of stuff I like dreamt of being able to do, but like one of the most infuriating things is like there is no good data on that, and it's because there really aren't that many trials, and the whole system is in this weird entropy where like everything is ruled by plea bargains. It's like a giant prisoner's dilemma, and so there's like like less than 1% of cases go to trial, But when they do happen, they're fascinating, and there's such a limited sample size that there's a whole industry for people that are like jury consultants and people that deal with all of this sort of softer science
My
type. Yeah,
my ex-wife was a conductor of mock juries,
yeah,
and now she wasn't
Dude, moot court is
deciding.
fun.
She was putting the people. She was putting the people in the room, deciding who would be on the jury and things like that. And there was I don't remember the celebrity. It was because there were a bunch of them, but one of them was up for like a big tax case, financial case. It was federal, and the one of the requirements for the jury members was, I think, like half of them had to not have a high school diploma, because that was what the jury pool was going to be. And you're like, how do you this is what we leave stuff up to, right? So
Well, I mean, I don't like. I've only heard this from other lawyers that there's like this running joke that they talk about that all cops are dumb, and here's the evidence, and then they cite some case from like I don't know 10 years, 20 years ago, some about some cop in Connecticut that tried to get a job and he scored too high on the test with the police department. So then they denied him because the research shows that if you score too high or too low on the test, then you won't stay for 5 years. And the amount of time that they need you to be trained, for the training to be worth it, to pay for it, you have to stay for at least 5 years or whatever. So like that's like their evidence for being like, well, you can't be too smart, so you have to be a certain level of stupid to stay in the Connecticut police force or whatever they're whichever state it was. I don't remember exactly.
my experience with that was when I went into the Air Force. You take I think they might call it ASVAB. I think we called it AQE test. I don't remember. And if you scored too high, you could not go into be a security policeman. And because one of the guys that I was in the tech school with had wanted to become. That was what he wanted to do, and they wouldn't let him do it because he'd scored too high. And made me feel good about myself sitting there with this guy because he scored too high, and I was like, oh, it means I'm smart. And then find out that I probably didn't score high enough to get into another 80% of the things I would have liked to have done. So just a couple of quick things, Dave. The thing you were talking about with the cops, New York City just sued Nassau County or Westchester County, I am not sure of who it is, and won the cost of training a police officer who, after 2 years, quit the NYPD and went to work in another county. And NYPD sued that county to get its money back for having trained the guy. And apparently in New York, it is there's actually statutes that involve it, and they had to pay. So it was about $50,000-$60,000, I think, but I'm not 100% positive.
Yeah.
All right. Incident, Leo, bringing us back to where we were originally. So part of the lawsuit that I found that was interesting was if you sue on a copyright claim that involves YouTube, you have to bring YouTube into the lawsuit.
yeah. I don't think that's actually accurate. And when I listened to the rebuttal of DMA, he made some good points on that. That it doesn't really follow or make sense because then, like YouTube would have needed to be a party, like in the Ethan Klein lawsuit, for example, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, and the Bent Pixel and
Yeah,
what's his name?
unique.
Yeah, unique. Yes.
He was on the Opie and Anthony Reddit back in the day, and I was also
yes, he was.
Yeah,
oh, yes, he was. Well, that just as a side note, I think that's kind of how that's how kind of the amalgamation of Red Bar, I think, existed. Like once that got shut down, there was like a necessity for the hate.
Yep.
And they all
I-
flocked.
I became a Red Bar listener after that for a short. I mean, yeah. Anyway.
Yep. Give it a year.
I'm not a Red Bar fan, and I made a negative comment about him the other night, and he does have a lot of supporters. And it's not that I'm not anti-Red Bar. I just didn't get his recent stuff. On the
It's like
Klein,
it's like hating the devil. You understand he's a necessity,
Yeah.
okay,
right?
on the Klein lawsuit, I could be wrong, but I don't think he's suing anybody for streaming on YouTube. I think the 3 streamers that streamed were like on Twitch and Kick. So that may be why he doesn't have to enjoin YouTube.
He does also fall into the same Twitter trap that everybody else falls into until some savvy listener or chatter comes around and says, dude, you don't have 250 people watching you on Twitter. What that means is 250 people viewed it for a second, and that's it.
Right.
Yeah, that sort of stuff is like fascinating because one of the reasons why I even sort of look into it a little bit, because I normally don't care and it's not relevant, but like just because Aaron like projects this sort of stuff, it suddenly becomes interesting how many viewers he actually has. And like whenever you like overturn any sort of rock, you're like, oh my God, like how many people are actually listening to this guy? You know, it's he's like, I really think he's like almost has like a clinical case of Truman Show delusion, you know, where he's
That's kind of true. But here's the thing, though, too. Like, I would have thought he would have gained way more than 3,000 subscribers since this whole thing happened. Because
it's interesting.
when Melton, like, okay, Chad went after him. Obviously, he's not going to gain that much from Chad because he's a loser.
Yeah.
But Melton, who had some audience, decent audience, goes after him, and then the whole thing blows up with Nick Ricada and all that. But that was at 10,000 or like just breaking 10,000, and like he's gained like 3,000 subs since then. It's like, it's kind of not. That's like the opposite of buying subs. It's like that's not trending well. That means that people actually aren't into your content. That there's so much of it around, and people are clipping the fuck out of it, and it's more entertaining than your show.
Yep.
That's the crazy. So I can understand the So.
Yeah, Dave, I got a question on that. First of all, first let's put up Sam Bibley's comment. Sam says, Schmuel, you didn't make a comment people don't like. You got everything wrong you said about him. It sounded like you were trying to bait people with how wrong you got it. No, I'm just that wrong, Sam.
That sounds like Schmuel.
Yeah, that's about me.
Schmuel Bibley.
So post arrest, and I know we said we weren't going to do steel toe stuff, but
it's so easy to get dragged into it.
But I have a question because it does actually relate to this. Post arrest, and he goes on Keno Casino and stuff. Did he get a lot of subs out of that?
Well, let's look at his current sub count.
I think it's been plateaued at around 13K for like a while, but I could be wrong.
So what I've noticed is it's actually hard to lose subs because people have to actively go in and unsubscribe.
Yeah.
Right. And I know that I don't do it. I do it every now and then because I've subscribed to a lot of shit, and then I go into my phone and they're all there and I want to kind of clear it up a little bit. But my question is, and I think Dave, you were hitting on it, like, so a guy like Steel Toe, let's say he goes in, he gets 10,000 subs from that. He gets eyes on his program. But what happens is clippers clip it. And now you're like, why would I watch him? I'll just watch the clippers.
Well,
is that an argument?
Well, no. I mean, the argument is that the clipper, hopefully clips you in a light that shows you in a good way, so that when you get like, I go online all the time, go on Instagram, and I find like I watch a lot of gaming streams, and I also do some gaming streams, so I enjoy some of that content. Some of these guys like XQC or Nate Shot or whoever the fuck, there's hundreds of clippers that clip their content, but that gets people to go to their content, and because they're funny clips. The problem is if you're not putting out your own content, like your own clips, like WATP puts out their own clips every day. So they're able to shed light. They're able to shed whatever light they want to with their clips. So, okay. So, but if other people are doing it in a negative light, that's not necessarily going to garner anything for you, personally speaking. So yeah, if they're doing good stuff and it's funny and people click it like, oh, I like that, let me go follow this guy. That's not how it's being portrayed, unfortunately.
So that gets back to this. So that gets back to this lawsuit, right? And
wow, I mean, good point.
and the fair use.
Yep.
So it's like, let's just we'll use So Thorough Joe Burrow, right? And So Thorough Joe Burrow clips me, and it's like it gets me a ton of viewers. And then what happens is people come to my stream and go, this guy, his show sucks, but the clips are funny, and So Thorough is the only one that's watching me. And now what's happening is So Thorough's clips are actually hurting me and my engagement, because nobody's coming anymore at all, because they're just watching clips.
I think the argument against that in terms of the law would be that like the YouTube algorithm is so sophisticated these days that for like a streamer that has good content, like having an ecosystem of like clip channels around you makes it so that like the people that are into you can get fed like different types of content about you. And so a larger percentage of their algorithm becomes your type of thing, your slice of the YouTube
Right.
pie. And so in a weird way, like the clippers and like the people's reaction to them can kind of be like almost like a mirror. Like it just basically tells you whether or not your content's good. And if you look at analytics at all on your YouTube stuff, I don't do it as much as I probably should. But like what it tells me and what it tells, the data show is that like most people are just going to hate your stuff. Like the viewers like nosedive in every single video because like the most viewers like in the first 7 seconds or whatever, like.
Well, fuck this guy next.
And so you just have to like embrace that, which is why like I see people saying all sorts of really interesting and florid things in the chat, and it's like, yeah, all right, another day.
Me included.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the meanest one to Schmuel, so I get it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, Leo, that you say that, because when I've done some research on YouTube and looking at a lot of these guys that sell YouTube training and all that other stuff, so it's a generally accepted fact that people watch the first several minutes of your stream, and that's where you need to engage them and all that. But
streams and videos are different in that regard too, by the way.
But most streamers go slow when they start. They're like waiting for their chat to come in.
Opposite,
and so it's like, but what you just said is videos are different than streams. So maybe it doesn't have the same deleterious effect on streams as it does on videos.
I think it does, but it's just like what you're trying to do. People have an expectation when they're watching a video versus a stream. Like with a stream, it's more they're there for like the personality and to like listen in the background perhaps, but like the same sort of like fall off happens in all these. And so what you're trying to do in the beginning of your video is to prevent that as much as possible, to like delay the total fall off of like 90% of the people. If you can get it to 80%, that it's a huge difference,
Yeah, we've tried to get Dave to do backflips, but all that really happened was his hairy belly came out, and
I tried to do a cartwheel, and I was afraid of hitting my feet on the thing.
Yeah, well, really, you guys aren't that far off, because like a lot of what you hear out there is that you're supposed to have some sort of visual hook that like leads into, I think a lot of that stuff is like going to be out of date the second somebody puts a YouTube video out about it. Anyway.
Yeah, let's burn half of my face. Schmuel, you down?
That would be a winner.
I do the left, you do the right. We'll be the Burn Brothers. It's a whole thing.
I think there's a Star Trek episode based on
Oh shit!
Saturday night, when we were doing my backyard stream, I was using this lighter to light my cigars, which you can see the flame is pretty vicious. And Brandon Deft I had on as a guest, and he's like, "Geez, be careful, you're gonna burn your nose." And I'm like, "No." And then he's like, later on, "Be careful, you're gonna set your face on fire." I'm like, "No, it's all right, don't worry about it." Later that night, after the stream ended, I went to light a cigar. I was looking at my phone, and sure as shit, I burned the bottom. I set the bottom on fire. But you can't tell because I'm so red and unattractive.
Yeah,
all right, I have a correction to make, by the way. I said that potentially criminal was in the probation department, and I am wrong. He was part of the public defender's office.
Okay.
All right. I have a lawyer who is listening to our stream and texting me when I get things wrong tonight. So that was so far.
The
That's the only thing I've.
the public defender's office is what I like to call the poor chat.
That's where I started, by the way. That was my first gig in the legal world, was at the public
Oh
defender.
yeah, I know.
And it's a meat grinder, man.
And then we turn into super chatters, and then if you're lucky, you turn into a whale.
Hey. Yeah. God. What a
And
world.
then you just send money to Kevin Brennan just for the hell of it on the side. Just be like, here's $500, bro.
I think I'm a big spender when I Venmo Pat Dixon $15. You know.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Schmuel.
So, this is. I don't know that we know the answer to this, but I have a question about this. So the stream ran in 2023.
Yeah.
The registration was not filed until 2024. Now.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Is it
retroactive or not?
Is it? And then how would I know that it has, because the YouTube terms of service says you can reuse, your content can be reused on YouTube. You grant them the license to do that. Limited right? So assuming that it was, let's say, even if it's not fair use, I guess it doesn't really matter. But is it copyrighted material beyond, is it copyrighted material that you could do something about that appeared on YouTube because you gave YouTube the license, right? Like you've given YouTube a license to air it on YouTube.
Yo,
so
dog,
does that just clear YouTube, like YouTube and not
YouTube inside of your YouTube?
I know, I'm trying to like
YouTube.
I know.
It's an Incepticon of YouTube. I think the thing that getting the actual copyright allows you to do is to defend it somehow in court. But this is not something that I ever had any experience with when I was working in, the criminal world, which is much like it's such a rough trade compared to that sort of stuff,
Cigarette Jones, Karmic is going to sue everyone for infringing on in his AI made music. I'm looking forward to that one. And,
it does reveal like a really big issue with the law, though, is that it's like hopelessly ill-equipped to deal with technology, and like the law is just so far behind in almost every respect. Like the way that expert testimony and like anything that's like scientific gets into court is like shocking if you know the whole system, where judges are like the referees and gatekeepers, and so it's up to like some 6-year-old lawyer that has no idea about this sort of thing, whether or not it's wild. And it's just, there's so many things like that. Like I don't want to reference Aaron's case again, but I've been working on that, like reading tons of stuff for the last few days on that case. And like the way that HROs work in an online world where you can commit dozens of infractions in like seconds, and that just wasn't anticipated. It's just,
yeah, it's the HRO setup. I have a young lady that works with me. Dave, would you, because I'm not watching it that closely, just put up some of you can show the chats, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that for you. Sure.
All right. All right.
Dave, where are you, David?
Go back to your damages question.
Yeah.
Our secret attorney just
oh, great.
Said the issue is statutory damages. DMA is time barred from getting them.
Okay. Well.
So I guess that would mean he was entitled to what? Actual damages, but not.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I do remember that being an issue that was raised by the lawyer responding, Darcy.
Yeah. And anyway, I just got that. So that goes back there, but that totally threw me off of where we were. So we did talk about YouTube requiring that you have to bring them in. You don't put up your own chats, Dave. YouTube.
It's making sure the system's working.
YouTube is brought in, but then in the YouTube, also in the YouTube terms of service, you have to pay their attorney fees.
Yeah, and I don't know that applied to these kind of cases, because it would be like an access to the courts issue if like anytime a small time YouTuber wanted to take some, I don't know. Again, like this whole DMCA thing was like written in like the 90s and probably had more to do with like consolidation of, networks or something like that than actually anticipating how this issue would resolve itself. But I almost feel like the copyright thing is like, I don't know, there should be a different system created. I always have these sort of flights of fancy. It's like, man, we can do something better. And then you just like come back to reality. You're like, all right, well, we're actually going to be stuck with this for the next 20 years. So how does it apply, And
Right. So the I've heard a couple like from the one lawyer, like, copyright law is intentionally vague,
yeah,
so that it can be handled on a case by case basis, and yeah,
that's why like the lawyer's mantra is it depends. It's like, well, if it depends so much, like, then how do you know that you have something that's like rigorous? And when, like the fundamental underpinnings of it is like one side is for like just referring back to the original framer's intent, and the other side is like, basically like whatever, doing whatever they want and like ripping up the laws every 2 seconds. So like even the two, like the conservative and liberal sides of the judiciary can't agree on like how this actually works.
right. And also too, but the thing is, look, there's no way that anybody could have anticipated that video streaming and the ability to just social media would be a thing, right? So it would be nice. Not going to happen because there's ball as sacks of shit. But it would be nice if Congress or whoever could sit down and say, "Hey, let's lend some clarity to this," because what's happening now is you've got the big guys, right? The Disneys of the world and the NBCs and those people running roughshod over small creators. And then in the small creator world, it's like,
Yeah.
who has the money, you know? So, and that enables you to sue. And, and stuff does become unclear because when we talk about like fair use, right? There's an exclusion for news organizations, right? So news organizations can put stuff up predominantly without fearing copyright challenges or et cetera, et cetera. And but anybody can claim being a news organization,
Yep.
So
Or the First Amendment to be a
right.
citizen journalist. Yeah. And, referring back to something that Dave touched on earlier with the horseshoe theory, like this is, again, the nature of our system is that's inherently like reactionary and trying to catch up. Where like, I was reading into the history of the auditing movement as I was discussing briefly with you, Schmuel, and like it really sort of comes from the Black Panthers in the 60s, right? And they were like following around cops because the Panthers allegations was that the cops were doing
guns.
all this bad stuff. And so very quickly after that movement started, Ronald Reagan, then governor of California, wrote a law, to bar that practice, which 40, 50, 60, 70 years later, we get this weird unintended second order consequence of like the audit movement. It's like they're not really thinking any steps ahead. And so it just ends up having all these strange bedfellows where like the same birth gave you the Black Panthers and like the 90s Berkeley movement where they were following around cops. And then you get like the sovereign citizen. It all comes out of like this really weird, yeah.
But in a way, it's kind of a more fair system because then you're getting a hearing on the facts of your case, right? Not on necessarily what they think is going to. Imagine a judge pondering how this is going to turn out, down the line. Now, some things you could predict, right? But some of these things you can't. The case involving Black Panthers and that stuff, you couldn't have predicted that some idiot was going to be walking into the post office with a camera challenging postal clerks. So,
I have a
Mr. Z.
sorry, I have a quick
No,
question.
go ahead.
Okay. So, and I don't expect you to know the complete answer to this, but like, okay, so we have like Kick and we have Rumble and stuff like that. And basically, is it just that they're not big enough for Universal or whoever to sue these guys? So there's no real like reason for them to have to put in the filters to filter out the copyright stuff, or basically like it's okay until somebody complains about it? Is it kind of how it is? Sort of like Rumble. Okay, Rumble is not. It's definitely not as big as YouTube, obviously. Sort of in the United States, it has the spectrum of like as a it's got some aura, but enough so, and like definitely going against certain politics that are sort of mainstream. But like you don't see Universal, you don't see music companies going after Rumble for playing the music. So is it just that YouTube's lawyers are just afraid of being sued every second that they have to put in these crazy filters, or is it just because they're working together? I mean, I wonder, because there's a lot of that too. They're working together. They have all
Yep.
their music on the platform, so that's probably what it is, really. So they have access to it anyway. But like, something tells you, like, if like Twitch now will DMCA strike you because they've gotten so big, but they're owned by Amazon.
Yep.
So yeah, so I guess like the idea of like the copyright stuff is really just you started a platform, and until you get big enough, nobody's really going to bitch or try to sue you. I don't know.
So does the Leo? Quick question for
Sure,
you.
yeah.
The DMCA though, doesn't it shield YouTube and Rumble from that?
Yeah. It has basically like a hold no harm clause where they're considered like the transmitter, like, or the sort of public square where everybody makes their speech. And so they that's a big part of the DMCA, is that it doesn't regulate what happens on YouTube as if it's YouTube speech. But I think like usually the answer to these sort of questions, Dave, is money. Like when the streaming services like Spotify and all these guys started really rolling, the companies that hold publishing like Warner Music and all these people got in bed with the streamers to get kickbacks on all the streams, thus bypassing the artists. So they were able to, benefit in the end from this new system. And I think, there's maybe a similar thing going on just because of the consolidation of corporate media. The tendrils all end up bleeding back to the same place, which is why I was making, comments about how the law is reactionary. Like it shouldn't let things degenerate to this place where now we're trying to like bail out a boat that's like filled with water. It's just always trying to put a band-aid on a gaping wound. It's just never there's never a good solution or a good answer.
Yeah. I always think with Google, it's about money, right? Google makes its money on advertising. That's where its dollars come from. So it has a vested interest in keeping the NBCs and those guys the happiest, because those are the one, the places that advertise and the places that draw. It's nice that, Mr. Beast draws what Mr. Beast draws, but a TV show is going to draw a lot more and more regularly. So
I mean, it's just crazier to me. It's just crazy to me too that like a lot of these independent, I guess it must be just too expensive, because even on Rumble, like they don't have their own processing companies. So like Rumble has its own processing. You start a channel on Rumble, you're gonna accept money right away, and you
weird.
You have an account and you could just send money, but they take 50%, and that's more than fucking YouTube. YouTube can take up to 50%, although it might be changing now if it's done from an iPhone. That might be changing.
Yeah.
But like if it's done from an Android or if it's done from a Windows, the prices are different. It might be as low as 40% they might take, or 35% or whatever. But the point is that like Kick doesn't have their own processing. Twitch doesn't have their own processing. You can buy subscriptions for people. You can do that thing, but you can't just send them cash. But I wonder why more of them don't do it. I don't know how expensive it is, how difficult it is. But when you look at the Rumble versus YouTube, I'm like, well, shit, it's actually cheaper. It's like better on YouTube than it is on Rumble.
Mm-hmm.
Unless the creators get a better deal. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna ask you: is there a lot of like full movies and stuff on Rumble? I haven't used that platform since like the Bloodsports days, like 10 years ago.
No, not like you could probably find some full movies. I'm sure there's not like a treasure trove of free pirated movies on there. I feel like that's a good way to get DM, like to have companies come after you. However, there's tons of streams of people like myself and Mersh and whoever that play
Gotcha.
music, that do watch alongs. I mean, I sat and watched Saturday Night Live when Shane did it, like a couple months ago. Spectrum TV, like there was nothing, not a message from anybody, not a nothing. So,
One thing that's interesting to me along those lines is like how all those restreamers like crack streams or mess streams like work for UFC stuff, because that's something I actually will watch live
yeah,
occasionally.
crack stream.
And,
Yep.
and I'm not paying for fucking ESPN and then a pay-per-view for that shit. So it's like, in one sense, like I think some of these big corporations must have data that shows like it's better for people to use meth streams or whatever it's
Yeah.
called these days, than to like just not care and feel apathy
Sure.
towards the product. Because
I mean,
wouldn't watch it.
If you want an easy way, like people think, becoming a clipper is an easy way to like get your YouTube channel monetized. Bro, you want to get your Twitter to fucking 50,000 subscribers or 50,000 K or whatever, just start restreaming the UFCs. You'll have 10,000 people watching every single day. Real people watching and chatting, not this bullshit, whatever. And they don't get shut down at all. So it's like there's no incentive for them to not do it. I'm telling you, in 3 or 4
Are
years.
you talking about on YouTube?
No, on Twitter. On Twitter.
On Twitter?
Yeah. So if you want to get but I was making the correlation to like the YouTube clipper versus like the guy who just restreams the fights on Twitter. That dude gets all kinds of subs. There's plenty of them. And one day he'll get 10,000 subs. When I say subs, I mean just followers. I don't mean subscribers, but like it still can correlate into money. Sorry.
I think like one of the things that is shared in common between a lot of these like institutions, like the NBA or the UFC or any other company that deals with like traditional rights, like the publishing industry, is they're used to a model where like their attitude was supposed to be like to keep things under your hat and like make it so people couldn't take an excerpt of your book or whatever. Whereas I think the UFC deal was especially interesting because like things got like a lot more, I don't know, just UFC just seemed totally checked out because their deal with UFC or with ESPN apparently just ended, although this is apparently negotiations are ongoing. But like it was just a weird space where it seemed like nobody cared about the rights, and like it's like it's very bizarre because things are and the law does not anticipate this.
My prediction, I mean, I don't know what it is right now. Like I don't know if UFC has a deal where you could buy UFC a subscription and that includes a certain amount of pay-per-views. I have no idea, but bro, you go to $15 a pay-per-view, you'll have tens of millions of people probably buying it all over the world.
I guess the rumor is
we're done with the $50 to $90 pay-per-view days.
Yeah, it's like when Anthony Cumia got fired from Sirius, and then immediately started a paywall company. Like so many of us are telling him at the time, like this is retarded. You have to put out like tester shows, like one free show a week. Otherwise, you're just going to like shrivel as a property. Like less and less people are going to find you out there in the algorithm, and you just don't want to have this sort of attitude towards your content. You want it out there as much as possible. So it's just a different paradigm that.
Yeah.
And
it was a little different back then, but yeah, for sure.
Apparently the rumors I'm hearing is that ESPN is supposed to go to, I believe, Amazon or I think it's actually Netflix, and it'll be included in its own tier that won't be that much more than like, because Netflix is already fucking expensive, but it'll be like $50 a year Netflix or something like that, and it'll be all the pay-per-views. I guess that would be awesome. I'd probably actually buy that.
Ooh, that's something that could be cool. That could be fun. Yeah, Netflix and the UFC, that's a pretty good mix right there, actually.
Yeah, because if people don't know, like the deal they had with ESPN was you had to pay, I don't know what it was, $10 a month for ESPN Plus or some subscription service, and on top of that you had to pay $80 a pay-per-view. So it was just like a double paywall. So
and especially Opie and Anthony should be like what's the word, like supportive in the fact that like not supportive, sympathetic to the idea, because they were not only paywalled on satellite, they got double paywalled. Well, they had to pay, Yo, dog, I heard you like paywalls. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Gavin McInnes has actually changed his mind on that because they're putting stuff on YouTube and it's doing well. And I think they're
Yeah.
getting a ton of new subs because
Because Stalin
it just proves
19
the
is
content.
doing well. Stalin 19 isn't racking up all that money. They're like, no, we got to rack up that money.
Yeah. No, it's fun to be able to watch those guys again because they just really weren't in my. Did you listen
That
to O&A back in the day, Schmuel? Or
algorithm is an
Yeah, I'm like
answer.
one of the. I go back to when O&A moved to New York on WNEW, the first station there, and
Started
'cause
listening in
we used to have it
2008.
on in the office. That was basic, and it was a music. It was a rock station,
Yep.
and the funniest thing, very early on, there was Anthony making jokes about Carol Miller
Oh yeah.
hiding from them and not wanting to look at them, and them getting notes and comments that this is a rock station, you guys will never survive.
Yeah. Was she the one that went on their show like super plastered and it was like a really weird, or was that like another lady DJ from New York in that era? There was so much weird media stuff that happened on that show back in the day.
There's so much that happened, and I'm like not like the radio guy, so
Yeah.
I've heard it and laughed at it, and if I'm reminded of it, I remember it, but I don't remember a lot of it off air.
Yeah.
The one thing I do that I never really hear about, but the St. Patrick's stunt, that they got fired for.
Oh yeah.
The comedian who was with the couple at the church,
Paul Mercurio.
Paul Mercurio, met the guy several times. Complete dick, and I always feel like he didn't he should have let it go, but he just I just always I've always blamed Paul Mercurio for that. It's probably not totally undeserved, but he's a dick, and I met him in other circumstances where I thought he was a dick. He's also a lawyer, by the way. Yeah.
Oh fuck, that's hilarious. I wouldn't be surprised because that the underworld of radio rats that want to appear on segments like that is unbelievably filthy, as I'm sure you know, as an early pest. And I guess the story with that couple is they were addicted to heroin or something, and one of them died shortly thereafter. It was sort of a sad story.
So I have never seen a picture of them,
Me
and apparently there is one, and I've been like, wait a second, I don't want to see it.
Yeah. Theater of the mind.
And then that's the other question is if you had like a hot 27-year-old couple, right, doing it, would it have created as much? Would everybody have been pissed off? Because I hear the black lady in my head going, ain't nobody need to see that. So This is a question for you from Peter Sky Parker. Any thoughts on Brian Kohlberger?
I followed a little bit. I think the main takeaway that I had from that case is how it crawled along, for I think 4 years before ultimately reaching a plea agreement. That it's just sort of baffling, and it's like the worst possible outcome in a lot of ways. Where these big cases, just I don't know, they just go around in circles, and it's all sound and fury, signifying nothing. And in the end, the guy pleads, and it's like nothing will ever be solved. That case, or we won't really ever know exactly what was going on there. I mean, we have the outline of it, but it just seems like there's so much other activity going on in that case with that house at 1122 King Road, and allegations of drug sales, and it's
and you're right. We're never going to get there. I always I was thinking, when people take a plea and he's basically agreed to life in prison without parole, from what I understand, as opposed to the death penalty, and the family, they're complaining, we weren't. There's always the possibility he could have gotten off, right?
Yeah.
And you would have gotten nothing. But what does the death penalty mean? In that a guy could be around for most of the parents would be dead by the time he's executed.
I have 2 points on this really quick. One, Idaho has the firing squad, so that's what it would mean in the end. And two, I've been looking for this article forever, but years ago I read this really interesting article about how the original sovereign citizen movement migrated to something that was called the Moorish citizen movement. It was basically like black gang members. And the
Right.
article is all about how the Moorish like movement, it was able to make it so costly for the state to prosecute like RICO and death penalty cases against them that the state just stopped doing it. So it's there's like certain things about that movement that are like powerful legal techniques. Another one being false liens, which is a tactic they use against prosecutors. And I actually did a research project on that, and that stuff is like no joke because they can just drop one of those into your file, and like years later you apply for a mortgage and you're screwed. So
It's insane. Near me, I have Moorish movers, whose dad was a big guy, big in the Moorish movement. And the truth of the matter is, these guys are the nicest guys in the world. But it's just and it's really funny. But the guy who runs it, he knows all about it, you know. And the father started it. That's the name, and he's not changing it. And he says it does occasionally stop him from getting work.
people probably mostly recognize it as a Seinfeld reference these days, but it does point back to like the utter sort of injustice and historical irony in all of this, which is that the RICO predicates were originally started to take out the mob, and then the people that wrote them said, our next thought for implementing them is to go after political corruption and against people that are entrenched in government and other power centers. Instead, they use them to go after street gangs. That's what they're for these days. They're for prosecuting one of my favorite music artists, Young Thug, who thankfully is free in the streets these days. But it's like that's why we have these sovereign citizen movements, and because they just maybe they don't understand like the exact timeline that took us here, but they sort of sense the gist of it, which is that this system's not really for you.
No, it's not. And that's when Karen Reed was found not guilty of the bulk of the charges, other than that like driving while intoxicated offense, and these lawyers were talking about, we have the greatest legal system in the world where she could get off. And I'm like, yeah, if you have millions of dollars, we do, right? But back to your earlier point, why are there no trials, or very few? Because a lot of them you couldn't afford to hire a lawyer to defend it, and you're not going to get one for free. And if you do get one for free, you're probably more likely to wind up with a worse jail sentence than you did get in the plea. Yeah.
There's a video that I'm working on that I've been trying to get like a good take on this in like a short video for a long time. But like one of the most fascinating things to me about this general phenomenon is there's a website called the Murder Accountability Project. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There's been like a bunch of magazine articles written about it, but it was a website started in the 90s by this data researcher who wanted to find out if he could catch uncaught serial killers, looking at murder data nationwide and finding pockets of like unsolved murders with similar MOs and similar victimology and so on and so forth. And it's an interesting tool. You can go and use their database right now and look in your local area to see if there's an uncut serial killer. And they found serial killers with it. I think they found one in Erie. But what it evolved into is they were the only people that were actually taking all of the murder data and like collating it for the entire US. Like even the FBI didn't do that. And it's a huge undertaking because anyway, the states all
that's similar to the a lot of times with DNA testing, right?
yeah.
So if they find they have DNA, they have no idea who the person is, they indict under a John Doe with the DNA, because then that will stop the statute of limitations clock from running.
Yep, it's a problem in big numbers with statistics. It's how there's even been false positives in fingerprints. Like this lawyer from Portland, Oregon, was arrested for like the Madrid bombing of a train in 2005 based on this same sort of phenomenon. But here's the fascinating thing about this whole Murder Accountability Project thing. They've shifted their focus. Like they're not in the business of like populating this database for unsolved serial killers. What they've discovered is that the clearance rate of murders in the US has declined from roughly 90% like in the 70s, to about 50% these days. The clearance rate, they explained all this on their website if you really want to get granular, but it's basically like when police arrest a suspect, doesn't mean they're convicted at trial, but it's basically a
They
coin
think
flip.
they know who did it.
Yeah,
Right. As far
that's
as the
great.
cops are concerned, it's cleared,
Yeah.
right? Whether are found not guilty or they don't care once they think they have the
Yeah.
person. But why do you think that is?
There's a lot of really interesting, like the Murder Accountability Project puts out in-depth reports about their findings and demographic data. And one of the big things they speculate has to do with is like the changing in demographics, where in the 70s, most murders were between people that knew each other. And these days, it's like, random gang shootings, who the hell knows? But it's so counterintuitive because we have all these new forensic tools, right? That we suppose, like the CSI effect, where everybody thinks that these people can solve any case nowadays, like with whatever hair fibers and stuff. It's actually just the opposite, because it turns out it's really important how you invest your time in like the spread of your resources. And the police and the whole system just doesn't even acknowledge this, won't even sort of broach it as a subject. It's bizarre. They just aren't efficient whatsoever, and
Are we
it's yeah.
classifying more things as murder than we did? Like,
That was
are the
that's it,
death numbers going up? Like, are the number of murders increasing compared to the number of people we find dead?
yeah. There's always a question of false positives. Like, are you getting extra sample? And there's lots of interesting analysis of this exact point on the website. So I'm not really, I'm not really that great of a math guy. So I'm not going to be able to explain this to you in any sort of literate fashion. But they've looked into that, and it's not that. And in fact, it's probably the opposite, because there's been like mentions in the reports in the last few years that different jurisdictions are actually under reporting the amounts of homicides to them, and they later find tranches of like thousands of murders that for administrative reasons didn't get it. So there's many factors weighing against that, and it's bizarre.
Yeah, because I just wonder if I don't know, 1975, you find
It's a
somebody
great
dead,
question though. Yeah.
right? You find they died of a heart attack or whatever. Now you do blood samples, whatever. It seems like you can tell a lot more quickly or more accurately than you could before. But I don't know. What's super interesting to me is the Orthodox Jewish community
Hmm.
considers autopsy to be a desecration of the body. And we've had a number of instances up here in New York where they will find bodies of Orthodox Jewish guys, particularly like in the river, in the East River, with no signs of obvious injury, whatever. And the medical examiner's office will defer to the religion, and they will take x-rays, but they won't, and maybe blood samples, but they don't cut the body open. And I've always thought, wow, if you wanted to kill somebody, these would be like sort of the best people to do. But it's such a strange. We're such a strange country. Sorry, that was out of the blue.
No, I mean it's really interesting, and I've spent like weeks looking at these reports, and it's just yeah. I would say that there are answers to be found. I think it's called murderdata.org is their website if you want to really dig in. They put out an annual report and other supplementary reports when there's interesting things
I
to
really
report.
thought you were going to say they monetize their data,
No,
and now they're
no,
like one of the bigger
no.
data companies. So when we talk, going back to where we started, kind of here. We At first I thought, and what piqued my interest in this was, I thought, oh well, these YouTube lawsuits may change the way we clip and stream. Not that I clip, but that the way clippers clip and stream and lend some clarity to things. But now I'm thinking that nothing. These cases themselves are not going to be the ones that change anything. And
Yeah, no, expand on that because that's interesting.
So the like, well, I don't think we on the DMA stuff. I don't think we'll ever get to a place in court. I don't think we'll ever get to a court that's going to actually make a decision on these issues. I think it's going to be decided on the secondary issues and the tertiary. You know, are they are they outside the time period? You know, what about bringing YouTube in? The cost of this. There's still issues with service, right? The
Yeah,
documents being served. So, and the Ethan Klein thing, although he's the guy that really enabled us to do much of the clipping and whatnot,
yeah,
um, uh, his case to me, I feel like it's a slam dunk. Like those are just cases that are going to settle. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think case law is going to change anything, but that's just my opinion. So, what do you think?
yeah. Sort of goes back to what we were talking about with how like everything's reactive in the way that the system works. Like these cases, like this thing with the First Amendment auditor and the anti-auditor, like that's not a situation that comes up very often, so it's not very useful as precedent, right? And the way that courts adopt precedent is it's not like they see it a novel and interesting legal issue playing out in their jurisdiction or wherever, and then decide sua sponte on their own to make new law on it. They have to like have something be assigned to them and then like do this weird archaic process of writing opinions and having dissenting. It's bizarre, and then people can sort of do what they will with that actual precedent based on the sort of two-sided nature of our system, where some people don't even really believe in that as actually precedent. So it's like it's so the system that we have for sort of making decisions about these things is like Swiss cheese, and it's also set up to almost as if they intended that it wouldn't catch useful issues to make as precedent. So it's like, yeah, I think you're right. And the Ethan one, like that's a little bit closer to a situation that arises fairly often. But it's just I think a lot of the things that go into like whether or not a case like that becomes precedent is largely political and based on sentiments of that particular judiciary.
Right, but he also set it up.
Yeah.
He first of all, people, there is no entrapment in civil court. But he set it up. He knew what he wanted to do, and he set it up perfectly. And he baited them, and they fell for the bait. So I think it's just it's clear to me as a layman that it wasn't fair use. It was really designed to fuck. He was really designed to fuck Ethan. That was basically what it was. Don't pay him, pay me. And so I just don't feel like it's gonna. I don't feel like anything would change from that.
No. It's all such a daisy chain, It's everything's really about something else. It's a proxy war, and maybe we're just modeling ourselves after our governments who love proxy wars. But it's like it's really not about the fair use thing. It's about the fallout over creator clash, which is really about the whole Palestinian uh,
Right.
Israeli conflict, which is like it's such a bizarre thing to have like three levels removed from a fair use controversy. It's I don't know. It's like nothing really is makes sense anymore and hasn't for a while for me on this sort of thing.
And in these things, there's also a significant amount of jealousy, right?
Yeah.
I think. But
Yeah.
when I heard Cumia was going on about the digital panhandlers, um, and these guys who have no experience and they're making money and blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, you were an HVAC technician, right? Like you had no radio experience when you came into this. So I see that. It's like they get pissed off. I was listening to Mersh the other night, and Mersh says, there's not a big enough barrier to entry into this market, or into streaming, and that's why all these guys can do it. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's what enabled you guys to do it. And it's that always,
Yeah.
I've climbed up the mountain, and now that I see you climbing, I'm going to give you a little kick and knock you down.
Yeah, pull this ladder up with me.
Yeah. All right. So for the last 15 minutes, Dave is here. I'm going to take him out because it's a little distracting. I want to go with just some random stuff. So you got I sent you the DMs today, right? And we talked a little bit about, and this is sort of steel toe adjacent, but it's more Gino, because Gino is my nemesis. I've been fighting with Gino longer than the Dabbleverse.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
But all right, the question always comes up. So they're planning to go. Gino and Count are planning to go to Minnesota for an event, right? Now the prosecution prepared but never served subpoenas for the criminal for an ongoing criminal case.
Yep.
Right. I was I didn't think that anything would happen from that now. Like I didn't think it would be resurrected or anything. But now that this criminal case is due for a hearing in October, do you think it would behoove the prosecution to serve someone who was in the state?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of speaks to a lot of the layers of this conversation we've been having, in that, like, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And, like, police are so constantly running around trying to put fires out and, like, acting as a sort of mental health wards of the state because the institutions were hollowed out in the 70s, and just all this weird irony and strange procedural history that came before us, that, like, yeah, I think it's a good insurance policy, but I think that they've become much less relevant given that Aaron has all these new related violating conditions of release charges, and also, in my opinion, has made admissions to the factual basis of the entire case on his show, which was like how this, again, circling back, like we're in a a epic poem here, like in Homer. We always come back in the Odyssey to where we began, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, it's yeah, it just never ends, and he makes the same mistakes over and over again, and that's why he's just utterly fascinating.
It's kind of scary that we're comparing Aaron to Homer, but
Yeah.
now you've worked in prosecutor's office. You work for prosecutors. They are human.
Yep.
Right. Is it possible, or have you ever seen them do something just to fuck with somebody?
Definitely. And especially like in a smaller community. I mean, I think my experience here is like very relevant to what must be happening. I don't know how big St. Cloud is, but I worked where I am now in Juneau, which is like a 30,000 person community, and so everybody generally knows everybody else, and there's always beefs and stuff like that. And the prosecutors aren't as bad, but like the probation office, like there's some people that work there that like would really terrorize some of the probationers. And the whole system of probation is, again, because it's in the criminal system, insanely convoluted and messed up. And it's something that we litigated for years at the public defender office. But yeah, they hold grudges. If you don't respect them in court, or uh, take their girlfriend for a dance at the bar on Saturday night, they're definitely not going to forget it.
Because my experience is the limit on all of these guys, what holds them back is money. If they had unlimited money, they just do whatever the fuck they want, right? So I don't know what the money situation is in Stearns County, which is, I guess, where this case is being tried. Could you? So you're a prosecutor, and for a year and a half, this guy has been calling you everything from pig to dog, as the Irish like to say, making claims, accusing you of many things. Could you see yourself sitting down one night and typing out a subpoena, and bringing that, just serving it? And would you have to justify that to your bosses? right? Because go ahead. No, go.
Yeah, no, I mean, prosecutors have very broad powers in how to conduct the cases, and if somebody's a witness in a case, like, there's never going to be an issue with you serving them a subpoena, and they might complain about it. But like the other thing about prosecutors is, in my state, it's one of the only states where they're not a political position and not elected the overall prosecutor in a county or whatever jurisdiction. But generally speaking, prosecutors in our system are very integrated into the local community, and that includes business leaders, people in the tourism section. And if you have like a national story happening in Stearns County that's getting on news and the internet and giving your area a bad name, like, would you want to be associated with Aaron Imholt? So I guarantee you, that when the prosecutor goes out for a few pops after work on a Friday, they're running into somebody from the Chamber of Commerce who's like, this guy has got to hit the book thrown out. Like, people always make those sort of um, there's just a lot of that sort of thing about the community, and that's the way it's actually supposed to be. There's a whole element to sentencing that's all about what's called community condemnation, which is you're supposed to show the community that you're upholding their values. And it's not just for the benefit of the defendant, or the defendant, Aaron in this case.
Right, and it is the people of that are the
Yep.
plaintiffs, right? Not the prosecutor. All right. So I'm not holding you to this. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. You're the prosecutor in this open case that's going to be supposed to come to a plea deal. It's supposed to be settled in October, but either side could withdraw the plea deal. It may go to trial. Would you serve a subpoena, a summons on a witness if that witness was available, on the possibility that it may go to trial, or especially if that witness has said, no, I'm not going to appear?
Let me put it to you this way. Prosecutors have so many things that they're working on and so many decisions to make that I doubt that even it would be done automatically if the witness was reachable in the local area. Like, people like the paralegal, I did a lot of that, like sending out subpoenas, and that's sort of below the general purview of a prosecutor. Sometimes they get involved in that sort of stuff if it's specific to the nature of the case, which it might be in this case, because there's been
Am I mixing my terms? Is it a summons or is it a subpoena?
a summons is for a defendant, or it can also be it can be issued in other legal proceedings where it's requiring you to come as a party. A subpoena is for somebody who's a non-party. It's a witness,
right?
Expert witness, something like that. Right. It's compelling you to either bring yourself, or there's another kind of subpoena that tells you to bring yourself and documents if you're testifying about documents rather than your knowledge of the case.
Knowing all you know about this case and everything, if you were in the prosecutor's office, would you subpoena these guys while they're in Minnesota?
Yeah, there's no reason not to. And we want to serve all the subpoenas because it's not that big of an investment in time, because you're just doing hundreds of them, as a matter of course, just so you're prepared. So why would you not do one and then have to think about it later on? Like, oh, why we didn't serve that subpoena. So if it's just in the regular course of business, if that happens, for sure.
And in most in places like that, the cops would serve it, correct? Or
and maybe it could. I guess one of the sort of hazards of this is Minnesota has some weird laws, as we've already discovered. But my impression is that that's the way it happens essentially everywhere, because it's such a basic function.
So here you just give it to the patrolman and say, hey, when you do your drive-by at Stoney's on Saturday night, would you do me a favor and drop this off? It wouldn't be that big of a deal. All right.
No, and I a lot of times, I as somebody that coordinated with victims and witnesses, you would touch base with them to ask them questions about the case, clarify certain things, make sure you have the right contact number, and at the same time, you just get them a subpoena. You just want to make sure that they have it, so that they know, so that they can go to their job and say, hey, look, I have this thing. So there's all sorts of things like that come into play, which make it just easier, for the inertia of the system to just do it as a matter of course. But that, there are exceptions, of course.
Right. And am I understanding correctly that if you're served that subpoena we're saying Minnesota, but let's just use Alabama, right? I'm in Alabama. The case is in Alabama. I get served in Alabama. I'm visiting and I get served. And come back to New York. Contractually, the state of New York is obligated to enforce that subpoena. Whereas if I were in New York, they're not contractually obligated to serve it. Is that correct?
So like the local, it doesn't. You're asking. Sorry. I hope.
And
Is
you
my
don't
mic working?
if you don't yeah, and if
Okay.
you'd not
It's a question I've actually researched. Can you hear me? I
I
unplugged
can
my
hear you
mic.
great. You're
Oh,
great.
perfect. It's a question I've actually researched, and it gets into like the history of how this whole weird system came into being, where there wasn't what used to be called reciprocity, which means that like your subpoena or writ in one state wouldn't necessarily transfer to some other state. The states were the several states in the original version of our country. So there's a lot of issues with this. And then eventually over time, something called interstate compacts emerged, which made it so that, there'd be federal laws that would allow this sort of interchange, but it still was like a very thorny process, because lots of different state laws like weren't compatible. Like, for example, the types of immunity that you get as a witness are still not, they still don't map cleanly from one state to another. So there's all sorts of weird issues when you have a state that's an outlier like Florida, which has weird immunity laws as a witness, where the police can just take you aside at any time and interview you, and then trade your Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself for another version of immunity. And like, how does that? So there's tons of case law on this. This case does not rise to that level because it's not like a case that needed to be thoroughly investigated. Everything played out on a slapdickery internet stream. So I don't think this, but yeah, it is. It does get kind of weird because you don't really have a local jurisdiction in New York who is specifically charged, I don't think, by some sort of statute or law to do it. So if they don't have to do it, they're not going to do it. They're cops. That's what they do. They're not going to make a run for you just because. So
Yeah, I just feel like, look, if you were in, Oneonta, New York, they're much more likely to enforce an out-of-state subpoena than they are, say, in New York City, right?
yeah,
Because they have so many more things to do. I can tell you my experience in Queens is back in the day of bounce checks. I had a guy who wrote me a bounce check. Now, in other jurisdictions, they would have taken that seriously and they would have done something with it.
yeah,
And the DA wanted 50 bounce checks to 50 different people in order to even consider it. And you can't get the 50 people together. The guy
yeah,
wrote that many bad checks, but you can't, and the amounts of money didn't rise to the level that they were even interested in. All right.
exactly.
My last question, and this is my wild, out of the blue sort of whatever. All right. And it's also a process. So if I were to say file a lawsuit against somebody
hmm
for defamation, picking a thing, um, now I can serve them. I file and I can serve at essentially the same time. Correct?
Yeah, and it's usually the format that comes in. You'll get the complaint and the summons at the same time. But sometimes actually serving the summons becomes a problem, and then you might have to do something like, if you've tried to serve them and they've been evading it, you can publish it in the local paper or something like that.
Right. And now it's I think it's too late. It's not going to happen because I think the event is this weekend. Um, but if you got so let's say a one of the people in this decided to say sue one of the entertainers that was showing up for defamation, and that person lived in another state, but they were going to be in Minnesota. Um, would it behoove the plaintiff to file and serve the subpoena in Minnesota while they were there?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make it a lot cleaner, but there's like a whole other section of the law that deals with where the correct jurisdiction is, and it's a big barrier that a lot of cases fall at. It's basically like the first big hurdle for these types of cases is this the correct jurisdiction? Should it be in Minnesota? Should it be in New York? Should it be in federal court? Should it be in state court? And there's all these things called like long arm statutes, which specify
right,
the rules for each state and whether or not they can bring somebody from New York into Minnesota. So it's very
right,
complicated.
but right. But if you were sued in Minnesota, this is, uh, I mean, I don't know why I keep using Minnesota, but if you were sued
Yeah,
in Minnesota and
it's random.
served in Minnesota, the
Yeah,
issues of venue and jurisdiction would be settled in Minnesota, right?
yeah, and it would actually be an important point because one of the main prongs of the analysis for the long arm statutes and whether they relate to a certain state is do you have significant business ties to that state, right? Do you actually go to that state and conduct business in it? That's like one of the main sort of things that courts consider in terms of whether or not it's an appropriate jurisdiction is, does it make sense? Is this the best and most convenient jurisdiction for both the defendant and the plaintiff? And again, something that the law hasn't really caught up with, because if you're like an internet guy, then everybody sort of does business in every state on some level. But if you're going there for an event and you have like one of your main uh, people in your company that it's like your second office. Like if it was like the out of town office that all the people in the office show went to sell paper, then yeah, you probably have significant business ties if you go there for a golf tournament twice a year, or whatever.
Well, let's just say that I wanted to fuck with you. Bottom line,
Yes.
right? I just want to fuck with you. That's all. That's all. That's all I want to do.
Yeah.
Um, so I issues of jurisdiction, venue, all of that aside, right? I serve you with this lawsuit.
Mhm.
Now you're the defendant. In order to fight jurisdiction and venue, right? You're going to have to do that in the court that the plaintiff did. So even if the plaintiff loses, right?
Yep.
I'm an attorney. All this is costing me is court costs.
Yep.
I don't care about anything else. It's going to cost you oodles of money to have an attorney to fight it,
A
right?
local attorney too. So it's like it's not somebody from where you are, where you might have more contacts in that world. Like it has, because again, these are so specific to each state. Like you have to find somebody in that jurisdiction who knows the state law and is licensed to represent themselves there and can actually gain admittance to the bar and courtroom. Because if you have to go through all this crazy hoops if you want to practice in a different state than the one you've
Right.
been accepted. It's so yeah, there's a lot of barriers to entry there that make it onerous
So
for.
all right. So my bottom line is this is really what I'm driving
Sure,
at.
yeah, no, this
If
has been
Nick
fun.
wanted to fuck Gino,
Mm,
right? Because he's pissed off at him for all the things that he says. He could. It's not going to happen. No, this is just me making shit up. You technically could file a lawsuit and serve the guy, and
yeah,
then the guy would have to defend it, even if he claims it's frivolous. Anti-slap. There's a strong one in Minnesota. I mean, that could be pulled, but I don't think those win in nearly as much as people think they win.
yeah.
So I don't want to
No,
pull you in this with me. I'm
no, it's a
sorry.
great question. There's a lot of interesting areas to go. Like anti-slap laws have been so corrupted that Scientology now uses them against individuals who are trying to leave the church from the Sea Org and stuff like that. So that's how bad those are these days in some regards. And also, like, it would be really funny if like Gino had to somehow interact with this very interesting scenario you're creating, but in reality, because he's such a dummy and like has run away from like any sort of significant problem or challenge or task in his entire adult life, what will end up happening is he'll do nothing, and you might get a judgment against him, but that and $1 will buy you a cup of coffee if you can find a real cheap coffee stand.
Right. The only benefit to a judgment is if they ever try to get a mortgage,
Yeah.
you're going to get you'll get it, because it's also, you can't collect from somebody that doesn't have any money, but it is nice to have it hang. You can have them hanging over somebody's head. And I learned several years ago that I was able to renew one. So I didn't know that could happen. It was presented to me as an opportunity
Hmm.
to renew a default judgment I had against somebody, but I needed to let it go because it was taxing my soul being so angry all the time. But man, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And I know we didn't really get to what we were. We did. I think we did. I think we addressed it. I also think that we thought in the beginning those lawsuits would be more important as a clarifying factor for YouTube. Or clippers and streamers. I don't know that that's the case today as we look at them.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to sort of maybe talk to people that have more expertise in that area. But I always think, you have a better understanding of what you think about something once, you actually enter an exchange with somebody. And so it's always great to find like-minded people that are interested in these same
Well,
weird subjects, So it's great.
Look, the reason why I have this show and use the show is because I to give me the ability to have a conversation with people that I find super interesting and wouldn't otherwise get to talk to.
Yeah.
And and I'm finding out tonight that some of our interests, cross each other. I I'm very into this the health and wealth gospel kind of preachers, these
Yeah.
Bethel churches and all that stuff, and all that's kind of falling apart at the moment. They're having a lot of issues, and with Tuesday night, I'll be doing that with Luigi Greenberg, who is
Oh, yeah.
who's also an attorney. Where he grew up in that world.
Oh,
And
was he from Australia originally, where it started, or are you referring to Bethel
well, Bethel
specifically?
is you're thinking of Hillsong.
Oh, Hillsong. Excuse me. Yeah.
Right. And no, we're talking, this is Bethel is in Reading, but
Okay. Yeah.
Hillsong was really the first.
Yep.
They're two sides of the same coin. Um, Mega church, and they got their music in everywhere.
Right.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking about. Is because I think there's somehow they're branded with Bethel. But that's a case I've just the whole reason I sort of know about that is because of the CSAM allegations against the founder in Australia, which
Right.
we've
And
heard.
that's what, right. So Bethel has picked up, their music is now all over the place, and it's being played in churches, and the question is, should it be played, should it not be played? But aside from the music, they've gotten into, there's a character named Sean Bowles who they promoted, and he apparently convinced several members of their church that God had spoken to him and prophesied that things were going to happen. And you have one young lady who God prophesied should marry this guy who was 20 or 25 years older than him. And she was lucky to get out with her life. Another guy who cashed in his life savings to make a documentary.
Did he cash out his 401k?
Yeah.
Karmics.
And his thing is, it's interesting with him because at first I was like, my first thought was, well, you're the fucking idiot that did it, right? But it turns out that he did like a Kickstarter campaign and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. And then Bethel kicked him to the side of the road, and it was like all these people lost money. And so it's really that part is interesting. But what's also happening is there's all sorts of child abuse allegations following these guys, and they're not a denomination. They call themselves the Association of Related Churches, and
Oh,
they've changed. They believe in apostles, new apostles, prophets, all that shit. So instead of your normal structure where you would have like a pastor and a board of elders, these guys have like the apostle is the leader, then there's prophets, and it goes down the line. And they're all huge money makers. So
Yeah.
you had Robert, we talk about laws, Robert Morris, who was the head of Gateway in Dallas, another one of these mega churches. He got, he had told them that he had relations with a young girl when he came in, and then it turned out, oh, she was 16 and he was 20, but the reality is she was 12.
Jesus.
And she went public last year with the allegations. Well, the deal is he moved to Texas. He'd been in Texas forever. He hadn't been back in Oklahoma since. So he thought he was free and clear because the statute of limitations had run. Well, Oklahoma had somebody talking about digging up old laws. Somebody in Oklahoma found an old posse law that
Oh wow.
if you committed a crime in Oklahoma when you were not a citizen of Oklahoma, when you then left Oklahoma, the statute of limitations stopped. The clock stopped. So he's
Wow.
looking at 30 years. The guy's in his 60s. He's looking at 30 years, but then he turned around and went after his church for his retirement plan and all that other stuff, claiming that they all knew about it. And all the documents have started to reveal they did all know about it.
Oh my God.
So then the pastor of a mega church in Colorado Springs, who replaced another whack job, lost his job. And this thing it's spreading. And all of their big leaders are spreading. The crimes are spreading, and they're getting caught. And it's very interesting because it's millions. It's probably $1 billion in money that these guys have taken from people. So unlike tonight, we're going to try to focus on one or two people.
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah.
The Sean Bowles thing is just, you have to look him up. He's really interesting. He was this prophet, and it turned out that he was social media mining, and that's where he was getting his prophecy. He was not getting his prophecy, he was getting his information from there. So instead of a cold reading, he was basically doing warm readings, and he would look stuff up, and then he would sucker you in with these things that you never thought you told anybody. And apparently there's dozens and dozens of people who've been injured by this. And it's interesting. It'll be fun to see how it turns out. And I've noticed that Sean lately has gone into Trump prophesying at the moment, the political stuff. Dave, did you have any? Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, Leo, go.
I just have one brief point I want to add here that sort of sums up things. Is I used to not be so interested in following the minutia of established religions, but I was really influenced by the work of this professor named Stephen Kent, who studies cults and new religious movements. And it's sort of what gave me the initial germ of the idea to really look into nascent cults, or what happens when a cult doesn't actually become a religion, and that continuum. And it's this sort of thing perfectly illustrates that process of the lifespan of a cult turning into a religion, and the different phases of this almost organism. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I'll definitely tune in.
Yeah, I'm sure on a less educational but more comedic side, Kurt Metzger talks about that because he was either a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon growing up, and he talks a lot about the cult-like similarities of either one.
Yeah, no, they're
I want to say it was a Jehovah's Witness.
I think you're right. Yeah,
and he's also, he's also an essential anti-Semite. So I fight with Kurt back and forth.
He's a socialist.
On no, because it's funny because again, it's one of these things. This guy that Kurt is tweeting out his this is the truth about Kash Patel, and I think the guy's name is William Clayton, but I could be mistaken. And I'm like, who is this guy? Let me take a look. And he was a TV news guy. He started a real estate empire, and all of a sudden there were all of these fraud lawsuits against him for his real estate dealings. And it got to the point where the prosecutors and stuff were having to look into it, and he fled. he up and moved his entire family to Portugal. And I guess he claims that he was being persecuted by the government. He's the new Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
And so I was giving Kurt shit about that today for retweeting his, following his stuff. So, but
Well, I did say less educational and more comedic, but
no, I know. I'm sorry. You lost. This is like that. This is the problem. This is where
I get it. You got everybody. I mean, everybody goes down rabbit holes.
I've got no. Well, I just think it's so obvious. So much of this stuff is like, isn't it obvious to people that you're in a cult? Like that's the part that amazes me.
You can't see the forest through the trees.
Or are they cults?
Or I guess you only see forest in the forest. Okay.
The one thing I'd say to that is like it becomes a lot more warped when it's like a second or third generation cult member, because that's sort of all you experienced in your formative years. And so there's interesting studies on that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
And look, dude, I mean, look, gaming is a great example even too. It's like, or the online community, let's just call it, but really the gaming community. It's like people can get sucked into some weird fucking shit very quickly when they're lonely and isolated.
Yep.
So don't isolate yourself. There's a real lesson here.
And the cult, right, gets you in on encourages loneliness and isolation, except for your fellow members of your cult.
Right. Something that you're already kind of doing. So yeah, manipulation tactics. I've seen it 100 times. I love the yeah. So
no. I don't want to take up any more of Leo's time. Leo, do me a favor and hang on a second. I want to talk to you after we go off, but I want to thank everybody for being here. All 6 of you that have survived. I was really trying to, pump up the Gino getting arrested in Minnesota thing, but hopefully that's that may be too far of a reach. Even in this wacky world of steel toe, but we will see. Anyway, you guys have an excellent evening. Thanks everybody for being here, and we'll see you Saturday night. And I blame Dames. And big thanks to Cigarette Jones for moderating the chat, which doesn't really need moderation over here. But
do you have any plugs, Leo?
There we go. Oh, thank you. So Leo, do you wait, Leo, do you regularly stream? Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have
I put up videos. I mean, I rarely host streams on my channel. I just have but yeah, it's at Leo Paul Helmar. My name.
And it's at Leo Helmar on X, and everybody give Leo a follow.
Yeah, no, I would. I mean, I'm sort of indifferent because I don't really use social media that much. Like I don't usually have notifications turned on. So, but it's fun to get in the mix every once in a while, and they're very valuable tools for gathering information. So that's sort of their utility. But yeah, I'm an analog guy, really, to be honest with you.
And speaking of prophets, if you go back and watch Leo's stream from a few days before the steel toe hearing, it's almost as if he saw it in advance.
Had seen this exact situation play out. No, but yeah, it was a weird one. That was funny the way that
played out exactly as you predicted. All right, I'm going to end the broadcast, guys. So thanks so much, and then you two guys, if you want to hang, that's cool. Hopefully this EvMux does not bounce you.